Hi, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. Firstly, I apologize for getting this out to you guys with such short notice, especially for such a significant full moon. My computer finally died on me and I had to go get a new computer. And so now I'm trying to figure out how to use this new computer and it feels really weird. So anyway, there's that. But really, this is a very important full moon. It is a super moon, first of all, and from my understanding, it's going to be the biggest super full moon of the entire year of 2025. So if you get a chance to go watch the moon rise, you might enjoy that. But also, this is it coming through the sign of Taurus, 13 degrees Taurus. This is where the moon exalts, okay? This is where the moon works with her greatest strength. And I'll go into that in a moment here when I pull up the chart. But really, what I want to do in this recording first is I want to break down the sign of Taurus for you because, as usual, this is definitely a time to be honoring our growth that's related to the sign of Taurus. About 6 months ago, we had a new moon in the sign of Taurus. That was the beginning of this growth cycle. Okay, over these 6 months, we've all been exposed to, we've all been experiencing this opportunity for this Taurian growth. Okay, and this is a time to be thinking about this. Like, reflect on this. How have I grown in these ways that are related to the sign of Taurus? But it's also a time as soon as the moon begins to wane. Okay, so let's point this out right now. The full moon takes place on Wednesday, November 5th. It peaks at 5:19 a.m. Pacific time. And with that said, at 5:20 a.m. Pacific time on November 5th, the moon would start to wane. So we can set the intentions to let go of any of this Taurus energy that just may not be serving us. Okay, that's we're staying in the natural lunar cycles. This is something I've been doing for almost 10 years now, and I really have seen such incredible results coming from, really setting the intentions and so on and so forth. So I'm going to break down the sign of Taurus for you in pretty good detail so you know what you're working with here. But I'm also going to be pulling up the chart and showing you some very, very prominent astrological forces. There is such a strong opposition going on between Mars and Uranus at 0 degrees Gemini and Sagittarius. That's kind of a spazzy energy. It's a freedom fighting kind of energy. So we'll go through all these aspects in the chart. And then I'm also going to talk about certain parts of the body that are ruled by this sign of Taurus because these parts of our bodies become sensitized and activated anytime anything up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Taurus. And so, of course, with a giant supermoon in the sign of Taurus, it's a good idea to be paying a little extra attention to these parts of our bodies. I will be mentioning some potential herbal remedies that can help support these parts of our bodies during this kind of transit. And as usual, I will mention some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Taurus. As many of you know, again, for almost 10 years now, every single full moon, I pull out my journal. I write down the growth that I'm grateful for. That's related to the sign the full moon is taking place in. I write down what I want to let go of that's related to that sign that the full moon is taking place in. And if you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which house in your natal chart this is coming through. Or in other words, what theme of your life is this full super moon in Taurus beaming her lights through, where that peak of that lunar growth cycle is. Okay, so which house, if you're working with whole sign, which is generally what I work with when I'm working with lunar cycles, I work with the whole sign house system. So you just want to see which house in your natal chart the sign of Taurus comes through. If you're using Placidus or say equal sign or something like that, then you're going to want to see where 13 degrees, and I think it's 23 minutes, Taurus comes through in your chart. So I always incorporate that into my journal entry, and then I like to take my gemstones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through, or just the overall astrological forces, and put them on top of my journal. Now, something else to mention here. I've had people ask me, oh, I heard you're supposed to put your crystals outside to let them cleanse and charge in a full moon. And in my very strong opinion, not every full moon is ideal for that. If the moon is transiting over Uranus, or if the moon is conjunct Mars or something like that, it's not always the most ideal full moon to putting, in my opinion, our crystals out under a full moon. This full moon is a really good one for it. In fact, I will definitely be putting my, bigger special crystals outside, especially like the clear crystal quartz are really, really good for be putting out underneath this full moon. And another little announcement, I just signed up for a course, a really exciting course. And I think for some of you who watch my videos regularly, you might be interested in something like this. This is actually kind of, I've taken many of these classes before, and they've all been really, really great. On November 9th and November 10th, They're kind of all day courses. It's of course online. The medical astrology with really good teachers, excellent teachers. We're going to go into herbalism. We're going to go into all kinds of interesting things. And I'll leave a link in the description, and I will also like pin a top comment if you want to go check out these medical astrology courses. And the thing is, you don't have to be there for the entirety of these. I can't even make the entirety of all day November 9th and 10th, but you get the recording from them, which is always really, really helpful. And not only that, but I think it's like for myself, I went into medical astrology. I think it's been 8 years now that I've, been studying medical astrology in some pretty good depth. But I had something unexpected happen. I wanted to study it because I wanted to understand, why our bodies are physiologically so different and, what herbs are good for this sign, what planet rules over the function of this part of our body, blah, blah, blah. But what I didn't realize was going to happen is that it actually made me understand just astrology in general on a much deeper and clearer level, like psychological astrology, or even, understanding transits, understand even compatibility readings have been clearer for me to understand since I started studying medical astrology. So you guys might find that interesting. All right, now let's get into the sign of Taurus. Taurus is what we call the fixed earth sign. Fixed meaning it likes to do things with consistency and stability in a steadfast way, especially in the element of earth. Okay, the earth signs tend to just by nature be a little more grounded, a little bit more stable. In fact, in my opinion, the sign of Taurus is like the most calm, stable sign of the zodiac. And does that mean everybody who's a Taurus is going to be calm and stable? No. Let's say, for example, their sun is in Taurus, but they're a Gemini rising with their moon in Sagittarius. That kind of modifies things. But the sign of Taurus, in and of itself, it's ruled by Venus. Okay, Venus, the planet of love. Venus, what influences things like harmony and calmness. And Venus can be a remedy for almost anything. Maybe not a sugar addiction. Venus rules sugar, but things she'll cool things down if they're too hot. She'll warm things up if they're too cold. That sort of thing. And really, the sign of Taurus, you'll notice a lot of Taurus ladies out there love their beauty products, and they tend to love like things that are aesthetically pleasing and super comfortable. Like I just picture a Taurus person with wanting their bed to have extra fluffy pillows and like a big old down comforter and fluffy stuffed animal on the side, that sort of thing. It's very Taurus energy. It's a very, very magnetic energy. This is what's so interesting about a full moon in Taurus is that if we're having a full moon in Taurus, that means the sun is in Scorpio. They're opposite each other. These are the two most magnetic signs of the zodiac. Okay. You'll notice people are drawn to Scorpios also, but to Taurus, people are drawn to Taurus people because this softness that comes with them. I've said this so many times before that my Taurus people out there, Taurus rising, Taurus sun, Venus in Taurus, my moon in Taurus, they're like the best huggers. It's that fixed energy, fixed earth energy, but also being ruled by Venus, which is like this like tenderness to it. It's actually can be a very sensual energy as well. And again, tends to be just like kind of, sort of calm by nature. Now, sign of Taurus, the motto is I possess. Like out of all the zodiac signs, this is the sign of a material possessions. And how do we get material possessions? Through money. Okay, so it's also like the sign that's directly associated to finances. As I've mentioned so many times before, there is a giant statue of, I don't know if you call it a sculpture or a statue. I think it's like made out of brass or something like that. In the middle of the financial district in New York, where stock trading and that sort of thing goes on, of a bull. Okay, the sign of Taurus is represented by the bull. Okay, it has a direct connection. That's why the bull is there. It's a connection. It's an association with income. Okay, and when I think about this sign of Taurus, I possess. It's like the best way that this Taurus energy manifests is people who understand the value of working hard. In fact, all the earth signs in some way, shape, or form can kind of be associated with work. Sign of Taurus, again, the quality of it is somebody who understands the quality of working hard, or the good things that can come from going out and working hard, so that we can have a steady income, so that we can actually go out and buy nice material things. And no, I'm not talking about materialistic people. I mean, honestly, if we're talking about this, it's like when we think about how have we grown in these ways, but also what do we want to let go of. Believe it or not, in this spiritual community, I know, going to events and gatherings and that sort of thing, I know quite a few very, materialistic people that are in that kind of community, which is very interesting. If you are somebody who's maybe been a little bit too, I don't know, like greedy with money or material. I need that. I want that. I need this. Might want to set the intentions to let some of that go. But on the other hand, maybe, you have been working hard so that you can have nice things. I also know plenty of Taurus people out there, and I'm not just talking about Sun in Taurus. It could be, again, Taurus rising or Venus in Taurus. I know plenty of Taurus people out there who very intentionally, have a partner who's very wealthy so that they can spend their money, or maybe they come from, wealth from their family or something like that. Taurus people in general tend to like material things, okay? Especially when they're like nice, cozy things. I'm actually thinking about, I met a Taurus recently. He didn't tell me he was a Taurus, but he was talking about, oh, I got this bike in the garage. Oh, I got this new truck. Oh, I got this TV. Blah blah blah. This is when I went to go buy my computer, and I said, "Are you a Taurus?" I go, "Yeah, I am a Taurus." He didn't look like a Taurus. His face didn't look like a Taurus, but I could tell by the way he was talking to me. I was like, "You are a Taurus." Um, so there's that. How have you grown in these ways? And just to give myself as an example here, so you guys, hopefully this will help you like understand this energy. It's like I don't have any, like in my natal chart, I don't have any planets or prominent celestial bodies in the sign of Taurus. The only thing I have in Taurus is Chiron, which would have to do with like wounds, potentially wounds that come from a previous lifetime involving, these material things or money or that sort of thing. And when I was younger, I mean, even as a child, I was a total minimalist. I did not want a bunch of stuff. And not only that, but going into like young adulthood, I told myself I want to learn to live without money. And there was times where I lived in my car. I literally had like a chest of clothes. That was it. And I just didn't want things. My car, I was driving a car that, was really getting pretty beat down. And suddenly, I think to myself, like, gosh, might have something to do with Chiron and Taurus, or not having, any prominent celestial bodies to help me understand the value of going out and working hard so that I can have a nice income and buy nice things. We go through things, something called progressions. Some of you will know what progressions are. It's kind of, in essence, it's like it's our own internal biological clock. Okay. And through these progressions, like my sun in my natal chart is in Pisces, but once my sun started progressing through the sign of Taurus, I think it was around age 36 or so, was something flipped in my head. It's like I'm evolving through this Taurus energy, where I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of never being able to like look at, like, oh my gosh, that jacket looks so comfortable, but I can't afford it because I'm trying to live without money. Um, I really was like, you know what? I want to start working hard. I want to really like, make money so that I can live a little more comfortably. And I definitely have found myself, it's been, oh, geez, 11 years now, where I've found myself slowly evolving through this Taurus energy. Not only that, but this sign of Taurus can even be associated with food. Okay, I'll just say this right now. The sign of Taurus rules this part of the body, including the tongue and the taste buds. And I was never a foodie, ever. Like I've always been the kind of person, when I was younger and I didn't know anything about nutrition or health or anything like that, I ate terribly. I really did, with like a lot of inconsistency, eating, pizza at 3 a.m., drinking with friends, that sort of thing. I just didn't have like the understanding of the quality of food, or like have a good palate or anything like that. And that's something else that I've noticed, is that since my sun progressed, it's been progressing through the sign of Taurus. I've really grown this stronger like understanding of the like what good nourishing food can do for our physical constitution, and food that really tastes good, food that's homemade, that sort of thing, food that's homegrown. A lot of Taurus people like to work with the soil. When we think about the fixed earth, this is like the sign that would be directly associated with things like the roots that grow from plants, or excuse me, roots that we can eat, carrots or even potatoes. Anything that grows in the ground is very like Taurus energy, energetically speaking here. And that's something that I started growing my own food. I mean, I kind of always used to have somewhat of a garden, but that's when I got really into it, growing my own food, understanding the the energy that we receive from working with the soil. That's very Taurus energy as well. Okay, so how have you grown in these ways that are related to the sign of Taurus? Maybe you've been working a little harder. Maybe you've been able to buy yourself something nice, or maybe you've been saving money, or maybe you've been learning how to, work with exchanges or, the cryptocurrencies, something along those lines. Or again, if that's something that's been too much in your head, a little too materialistic, you might want to set the intention to let some of that go. Maybe you've been learning how to nourish your body with really good food. Whatever it is, honor yourself for this Taurian growth. Maybe you just become a little more stable and grounded. I will say that's for sure for myself with my progressed sun going through the sign of Taurus. I was all over the place. I have a lot of mutable energy in my chart, mutable and cardinal. Mostly mutable. Cardinal means forest, mutable means adaptable. I was like, I'm gonna go stay over here. I'm gonna go spend the night there. I was all over the place. And this Taurus energy is definitely, in fact, I've even had people who try to guess my sun sign. Like, are you an earth sign? You're calm, which I don't see myself as calm at all. But that's like, I can understand why people would say that. So there's that. How have you grown in these ways? What do you want to let go of that's related to the sign of Taurus? Okay, let's go ahead and pull up the chart here. Okay, if you're new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So, with that said, what we are looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. So, again, this is November 5th, 2025, 5:19 a.m. Pacific time. You might want to see what time this is coming through for you in your own location. Okay, now with geocentric, we put Earth right here in the middle of this circle. These are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Like there's Venus, there's the Sun, there's Mars, there's Mercury. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these planets and celestial bodies will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this full moon. So let's start over here. Here's the symbol for the moon. Here's that glyph for the sign of Taurus. You can see it kind of looks like a bull. Okay, when we think about the bull is strong and steady. The sign people who have good Taurus energy in their natal chart tend to have incredible vitality because they're holding energy and it's the least likely sign to overexert itself. Okay, now 13 degrees, 23 minutes Taurus. Look to see in your chart if you've got anything near 13 degrees, 23 minutes Taurus. Maybe you've got something trining that near 13 degrees Virgo or Capricorn. Or maybe you've got something, opposing that near 13 degrees Scorpio. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's again, like the moon is what influences our emotional processes, amongst many other things. But the moon has a very big influence. Like everybody's born with a moon somewhere in their natal chart. Whatever sign the moon was beaming through when they were born will say a lot about how they process their emotions. And again, people born with their moon in Taurus tend to just have a little bit more of a calm nature with emotional internal responses. Okay, so we all are receiving that energy. Now, it's not necessarily the most calmest lineup when we get into, again, Mars and Uranus, that's a little spazzy. But just ultimately, that sign of Taurus, maybe that's some way you've found yourself growing in is, because there is so much emotional turbulence in the world right now. And I don't think it's going to, become any less. I think if anything, it's going to go more and more and more turbulent. So I think we can all really benefit from staying grounded and not getting wrapped up in emotional turbulence. Okay, so there's that. Now, over here, we can see the sun in the sign of Scorpio. Happy solar return season to all of you Scorpios out there. I absolutely love the sign of Scorpio. It's like this sign of intensity and mysteriousness. Okay. And look to see in your chart if you got anything near 13 degrees Scorpio. That sign of Scorpio was getting a ton of energy over the past couple of weeks. In fact, I might even tell a little bit of a story when we get to Mercury and Mars here, because they were both going through the sign of Scorpio. We have been receiving quite a bit of this scorpionic influence. Okay, it's the time of year when the veil between worlds is thinnest. Okay, Scorpio is very much associated with the process of death and rebirth. Okay, now let's go over to the ruler of this full moon, which is Venus. Here's Venus. She's like the goddess of this full moon because she rules the sign of Taurus. She's kind of like the number one key player here. She's activated, she's lit up with this full moon. And interestingly, she is in her other sign, the sign of Libra. So to be clear, Venus rules Taurus and she rules Libra. Sign of Libra is like the sign of relationships, the sign of sharing energy with another human, amongst other things. But it does, especially Venus in Taurus, has a lot to do with our interpersonal relationships, especially romantic relationships, or this could have something to do with either your daughter or potentially just another female out there, maybe a best friend, potentially a business partner, something of that nature. And part of the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on Venus here, I mean, yeah, she's in Libra, which is great, but she's getting some kind of interesting energies. This right here, this brown line is called a quincunx, okay? Going up to Uranus here. Here's another quincunx going from Neptune over to Venus. Then we have a sextile that's going on between Uranus and Neptune. I'll talk about that briefly, but what I want to point out, when we have two quincunxes, which are also often referred to as inconjunct, when we have two quincunxes pointing at a planet or celestial body, it creates what's called a yod, okay, which is often referred to as the finger of God, okay? So the finger of God is pointing at Venus here. Now, these yods, finger of gods, they can be a little bit troublesome, okay? Because these quincunxes are almost like a blind spot. It's like there can't really, there's this disconnect going from Uranus and going from Neptune over to Venus. Now, this could potentially, especially if you've got something prominent near 28 degrees Libra, say between like 20 to 29 degrees, 59 minutes Libra. There could potentially be something, or also see where the house, the sign of Libra comes through in your natal chart, because that would show like the theme of your life where this is going on. This could kind of play out as a disconnect or something confusing going on. I'm talking about with a relationship, with a partner, something that's confusing. Maybe you feel like something's being hidden from you, or on the flip side of that, it's so unique on how it comes through for everybody. But since Uranus is involved here, there could be something like a couple days after this full moon. It's like something really comes into like you're almost like shocked by something involving a relationship. I don't want to scare anybody. That certainly doesn't mean that everybody, obviously, that'd be kind of weird if every single person in a relationship in the world was going through something turbulent with their partner. But there can be that kind of energy that we receive when we've got a yod going to Venus in Libra, especially because she's also making a square up here to Jupiter and a square down here to Pluto. Okay, and then Pluto and Jupiter are opposing each other. So we got a T-square also pointing at Venus. Okay, those T-squares, to put it lightly, they can create like an uncomfortable force. An uncomfortable, sometimes it can actually manifest as a blockage, but that blockage is because it's something that needs to break through there. So that's interesting. There is some interesting relationship energy overall coming from this chart. Okay, now let's go down here and talk about Mercury and Mars. Okay, I kind of want to tell my little story here. So Mercury and Mars, they're still fairly close. They're about 5 degrees away. If you remember, if you saw my last recording, I talked about the Mercury-Mars cazimi that was coming through the sign of Scorpio. A cazimi is when Mercury goes exactly conjunct with, okay, the Mars, Mercury, Cazimi. Mercury and Mars are in the exact same spot in that sign of Scorpio, which is a very, very intense energy. It's very, I mean, of course, again, it's going to manifest uniquely to each and every one of us, but it's kind of a big deal, especially if it's hitting something in your chart. For me, it was hitting my natal Uranus in the 12th house. But anyway, so in like, first of all, the sign of Scorpio is kind of like the sign of death. I mean, it's the sign of death and rebirth, but it's out of all the signs, it's directly associated with the process of death. So Mercury here is in Norse mythology, Mercury is Odin. Okay, Odin, if you don't know, Odin is it kind of like this messenger of the gods. Odin is, I mean, a bringer of wisdom, but also makes he can go to Valhalla. He can go to the other side of the veil and then come back. Okay, and Odin had a raven. And so it's like, again, this is Mercury we're talking about in mythology. Mercury is Odin, and Odin had his raven. Hopefully, some of you guys already know this story. This raven, it was like his buddy. We'll just leave it there. So Mars here, Mars is aggressive. I mean, he's the planet of war, okay? And that's why when we have a Mercury-Mars conjunction, because Mercury also has a very big influence on the nervous system, okay? Mercury is like data processing through our mental function and also communication. And so that's why he's the messenger of the gods, just like Odin. Mars here irritates. Mars rules over things, and I don't necessarily mean rules over, it's just a direct connection, a direct association with things like knives, stabbing of things, cutting something open, even dogs with really sharp fangs, or Mars has a big influence on like somebody going into surgery, that sort of thing. Well, basically within 1 hour of that Mercury Mars cazimi in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of death, I went outside and I could see this like black like lump in my driveway. I was like, what the hell is that? And I walk up and it was a dead raven. Odin and his raven, Mercury, Mars conjunct in the sign of Scorpio. And I felt so bad for the thing. And not only that, but there was, where I live, there's a lot of ravens. From my understanding, I heard news that somebody in this somewhat of a neighborhood here, I live way, way, way in the mountains, somebody had a couple of pet ravens and set them free, and they reproduced massively. So there's a lot of ravens here. And all the other ravens were flying around, like freaking out and making all kinds of noise. And it was like such a trippy sight to see. In fact, I've even thought to myself, why don't we see more dead birds? Like there's a lot of birds. Where do they go when they die? Why don't we see more, like birds get old, they die, right? But this is the first time I saw really any bird. Actually, I've seen one dead bird before that, but a dead raven right in the middle of my driveway. And I thought to myself, I was like, did I manifest this talking about that Mercury Mars cazimi in the sign of Scorpio? And sometimes I feel like because of what I do, not just for work, but I'm so, I got astrology coming out my eyeballs. Sometimes I feel like I just have this really weird, strong connection with these guys. But that was fascinating. Now, they're still fairly conjunct, but now they're in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this is where things get important because the sign of Sagittarius, it's the sign that seeks adventure. It's like the sign of wildfire. It's the sign that it wants to go this direction, wants to go that direction. It's very energized and very optimistic, but it's also because it's mutable, meaning adaptable, and in fire, it's fascinated by everything. It wants to go on adventure, wants to see the world. And in the body, that also has a very big influence on the nervous system. So we've got Mercury coming through this fiery energy. We're all receiving, like our, nervous system is, and of course it's unique to each and every one of us, but look to see if you have anything between 0 and 5 degrees Sagittarius in your natal chart, because you've got the ruler, in short, of this data processing and mental function and communication, Mercury, okay, in this wildfire sign, still close to Mars. Mars is aggressive, okay? Mars rules over our muscles and our adrenals. And if you just look at the symbol for Mars, it's because he wants to pierce and he wants to penetrate. Mars doesn't, if Mars were a human, he'd be super aggressive and he wouldn't think about repercussions of injuries. He would just go. Okay. And in that sign of wildfire, even just look at the glyph for the sign of Sagittarius. It's the archer, always on an adventure, a wild adventure. Okay, now even more significant is that they are making, I mean, really, it's mostly Mars, basically an exact opposition to Uranus up here. Uranus, Uranus is what influences very abrupt things, spasmodic things. Okay, when we think about if Uranus was a human, I love describing Uranus this way. If you've ever known anybody who's like the kind of person will just show up at your house and unexpected, they don't call, they don't text, they just show up and then they like barely give you a knock. It's like tap tap and then open the door and they're like, "Hi, I'm here." And just loud and very abrupt energy. That is the kind of energy that we would get from Uranus. Uranus is a freedom fighter. Uranus does not want to be contained at all. Uranus is the one that's like just this very wild, all over the place kind of energy. Throws surprises at us. At 0 degrees Gemini, which Gemini also has a very big influence on the nervous system. Okay, 0 degrees. That's a pretty critical degree. It's the floodgates are opening for this energy. Not only that, but Uranus is in retrograde. When Uranus is in retrograde, he's extra spazzy. So this opposition is going on. They're very much activating each other. This very, again, especially if you got something between, let's go to from 0 to 3 degrees Gemini or Sagittarius. I would be very, very mindful with your words. I would be mindful to make sure you're not like kind of being too blunt in things or even like mindful of like how you're driving, if you're getting easily irritated by things. But ultimately, it's also like I want freedom. Like I won't hold back from what I gotta say. Like I'm just gonna barrel out with my communication because this energy is so spasmodic. It's so very strong because it's a combination of Mercury, Mars, and Uranus through the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. Okay, I hope that made sense. Now, going back up here to Uranus and Gemini. Uranus is in retrograde and he's on November 8th. So just a few days after this full moon, Uranus will pop back into the sign of Taurus. Okay, and be there all the way till I think it's April 26th. Like he already was in the sign of Taurus since 2018-ish. Then just recently moved into the sign of Gemini, but is now in retrograde. He's going to go back here again until the end of April of next year. So I just had this kind of epiphany the other day. The sign of Gemini, it's the sign of communication. Okay, it has a lot to do with things like social media or even just like journaling or whatever, any kind of getting messages out is very much that's that Gemini energy. I was thinking about this. I think once Uranus really picks up momentum in that sign of Gemini, so again, it'll be back in there starting in April, end of April of next year. I think it's April 26th. And we'll be there for the next 6 years. I think there's going to be some major things that go on involving free speech. Because again, Uranus wants freedom. I mean, we've already been seeing it. It was like lockdown of people couldn't say what they wanted to say on social media. That was a big thing. It's started to kind of, things are not like YouTube is not being nearly. I had a video be taken down in like 2022 or something like that. I can't remember. Maybe 2023. I had a video taken down for saying something that was just ridiculous. I mean, it really showed me we have to be so careful about what we say on these kinds of platforms. But that's starting to lighten up. And I think that's going to become a major, major focus. I think more and more people are going to start to demand for free speech as Uranus starts to pick up his flow through that sign of Gemini. Again, especially between, I would imagine like between May of 2026 all the way till I'm going to go with something like the midpoint of 2028. I think that's going to become a major, major theme. Okay, now, but also something to realize here is that Uranus has to retrograde back into the sign of Taurus. When we think about, again, the sign of Taurus is a sign of money and finances. I mean, just while Uranus was going through the sign of Taurus, we saw this massive explosion of ways to exchange money, transactions, Zelle, Venmo. I mean, PayPal's been around for quite some time, but what is it? Apple Pay, Cash App, like they're all, I can't even think of them all because there's so many different ways of sending somebody money through technology. That's Uranus has a very big influence on technology. But um, with Uranus retrograding back into the sign of Taurus until April of next year, I kind of feel like there's going to be something else that involves the collective's finances. Potentially something really wild that goes on, something with the stock market, or potentially something that goes on with digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, something like that. There might, I know people are fighting against centralized banking. It could be something that involves that, but that's going to be really interesting because it's like once Uranus moves back in here and he's just barely got his last few months, a little more than a few months in that sign of Taurus, he's going to be coming through hot and aggressive in that sign of Taurus. So that should be interesting. Okay, now another thing to mention down here is Pluto going at 1 degree Aquarius. He's not in retrograde, so that's great. But Pluto, the bringer of death and rebirth and brutality, and Pluto rules the psyche. Pluto is the influencer of, when I think of like the true Pluto energy, I think of somebody who had to go through some sort of like rock bottom experience, say like a drug or alcohol addiction. They had to go to the bottom of it and climb themselves out of that and then be empowered by that experience. Or even something doesn't have to involve drugs and alcohol. It could be something like, because Pluto can have an influence on like obsessions. You were obsessed with somebody you were in a relationship or something. You couldn't let go of that. There was jealousy. And then you had to go through something really, really emotional and brutal that hit your psyche. But then when you rise above that, when you climb yourself out of that and let that energy go, Pluto likes to flush things out. That's a very, very empowering experience. And that is why Pluto is called the planet of power. Okay, now going through the sign of Aquarius, Aquarius, it's the sign of humanity. It's the sign of really the whole collective. It's also the sign of technology. It's also the sign, I mean, when I say the sign of technology, it's like, okay, quote unquote advancements, technological advancements. I practically forced myself. I couldn't take it was like a 3 hour long podcast with Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, which I personally can't stand either of those individuals. I don't know. I mean, I know Joe Rogan's done a lot of really great things, whatever. And a lot of people say Elon Musk has. They're just not my favorite people. That's all. But I wanted to see what they were going to have to say because they're both obviously very, very influential people. A lot of people love these guys, right? And so I just wanted to see what they were talking about. And Elon Musk was talking about these, again, quote unquote, technological advancements and how he's going to upgrade the cyber car. And then soon there's going to be, he said, I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he said something within the next 5 to 7 years, we'll have flying vehicles. Okay. These are air signs. We're talking about anything that's up in the air, okay? Uranus influences like abrupt technological changes and is in this air sign. And Pluto, again, he's like very destructive, also going through an air sign. I'm thinking about like, whoa, kind of like, there could be some pretty ugly things that go on with people, think about drunk drivers all of a sudden flying in a car. I mean, I know that's kind of a silly example, but really, really interesting stuff. And I'm pointing this out because they're trining each other kind of for like a whole year. Because I mean, there's going to be times like you can see this blue line. It's really thick because the trine is very, very strong right now. There's going to be times where Uranus retrogrades back into the sign of Taurus. That trine won't be quite as strong, and then Uranus will start to move forward. Uranus moves faster than Pluto. That trine won't be as strong, but it's very, very strong right now. Basically, these guys are having a very, very strong conversation. Okay, that's a lot of big changes, okay? And then, especially again, like that could involve social media, any form of communication, breaking free from things, by the way, especially with Uranus involved, breaking free. Let's say you were programmed, let's say you're somebody who watched, I don't know, whatever, CNN or something religiously for the last 10 years. And so that information is, and nothing, it's not, I don't necessarily just mean CNN. You're watching one particular like news outlet or you follow a certain kind of information on a social media platform. It's this way for everybody. Everybody is programmed with a like field of information coming from one way or another. So let's go back. Let's say you're somebody who was watching CNN for like 10 years. And so that's just embedded in your head, all that information, whatever they're broadcasting. Then all of a sudden, it's like something comes along with this. And I'm talking about not just for one person. I think this is going to happen for a lot of people because this does have a lot to do with the collective. I think for a lot of people, there's going to be something that breaks them free from that programming, almost like a reboot to a certain degree. Okay, now also this right here, let's go to Neptune. Neptune, there's a lot of water going on here. And I mean, I've been seeing stuff that there's like Brooklyn, I think it was, New York got flooded. Obviously, we know what's going on in Jamaica. A lot of stuff that is involving storms, especially with water. I was even thinking about this the other day. Like, I had never heard of, what is it? Atmospheric river. I mean, I grew up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We had massive floods came through. We had to evacuate from our house once because of a flood. Um, I never heard the term atmospheric river up until like 2 or 3 years ago. And I mean, that's again something I think we're being programmed with. And of course, there's things like weather modification, which is not a conspiracy theory, is real. Um, I think that the combination of like storm stuff that's coming from the sky and coming from the air and turbulence blended in with water is going to become even more of a theme because not only do we talked about this stuff in the air, Pluto and Uranus, they're both very aggressive. Uranus and Pluto are very aggressive. Here we have Neptune finishing up in the sign of Pisces, 29 degrees Pisces. That's the anaretic degree. That is definitely, I mean, it's a critical degree. It's like the degree of chaos. I've heard it being called the danger zone. Again, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I think we're all going to be okay. I think there's going to be a lot of really, really big turbulence. Just, I mean, literally over the next like 19 years. And I am personally trying to manifest that through this turbulence, the people get their power back because I think we just have way too much government control. That's my opinion. But I'm not necessarily saying that there's going to be some sort of something that comes along and wipes out the population over the next few months or anything like that. But I think over these next few months, while Neptune finishes up in Pisces and Saturn finishes up in Pisces and the North Node in Pisces and Uranus doing this TikTok thing between Gemini and Taurus and Pluto picking up momentum in the sign of Aquarius and all of these guys talking to each other. Okay, here's Pluto. Here's this sextile that's going from Pluto to Neptune. Here's Uranus making a sextile that goes to Neptune. Then we've got that trine. It's a combination of aspects. They're all talking to each other. And Neptune is the god of the sea. Pisces, it's a water sign. Okay, not only that, but we kind of have a little bit of a grand water trine. We might see a little bit more like flooding, that sort of thing in the weeks surrounding this transit. But it's kind of as far as like weather goes, there's some pretty aggressive energies going on here. Okay, now also look to see in your chart if you have anything near 29 degrees Pisces because Neptune is beaming on that thing. It might be totally raising your psychic powers. You might be super, super tapped in. Everybody might be feeling a little extra like intuitively tapped in because Neptune has a very big influence on the our psychic boundaries. Neptune puts holes in our psychic boundaries, making us more psychic, making us more susceptible to picking up everything that everybody else is feeling and thinking. Okay. And here we have Saturn. So Saturn is Saturn's Mr. Rigid. Okay. Saturn is trying to bring this like somewhat of a discipline kind of energy through this sign of Pisces, which Pisces is the sign of, oh, we just talked about Neptune being the bringer of mysticism and psychic powers. Neptune's one of Pisces' rulers. Pisces is the sign of, being psychically tapped in and this mystical energy. But Saturn here is trying to bring in some more discipline to it. Maybe you've been trying to stay disciplined in your spiritual practices. Maybe you've been trying to stay disciplined and really like owning your intuition and trusting it. Saturn and Pisces can do that. They are in retrograde, so there also could be some reevaluating going on here. But regardless, if you got anything near 25 degrees Pisces, depending on what it is, there might be this feeling of like either intentional or unintentional isolation. But that's also another one in a water sign. So again, that adds to the water energy that I'm talking about. I would be super, I mean, I'm always like this, but I would be really, really mindful about where you're getting your water from, very specifically between now and March of next year, also actually even going through July of 2026, because there's all this energy coming through that has to do with water. And there could potentially be something that I mean, already there's so much crap in like city tap water. Oh, good Lord. If you don't know what atrazine is, look up atrazine. I mean, that's one of the very few that have been studied. But it's in like 94% of the United States drinking water. And I think it started out as an herbicide, but it's done some very weird things to our physical constitutions. I would be getting some sort of a charcoal filter or something like that. Um, and not only that, but even like say you live near water, be mindful of what's going on with the water there. Okay, enough of the water talk. Let me just wrap this up with the North Node is also going through Pisces, pumping that Pisces energy in. Again, that North Node's going through the sign of Pisces all the way until the end of July of 2026. So that North Node is pumping even more of this Pisces energy in. So we're all just receiving all this Pisces flowy energy. Now, the beauty of it is, again, Pisces, it's a sign of oneness. Pisces is like, why can't we all get along? But it's also, it can come with delusions, it can come with confusion. But the beauty of it is it can come with these very strong spiritually, you know, especially with Saturn there, like being disciplined with some sort of faith or spiritual energy, something like that. Opposite that, the South Node, the drain point going through the sign of Virgo, if you got anything near 16 degrees Virgo, that South Node is trying to take something away. I just gave a reading to a lady who's got a Virgo stellium in her fourth house, her house of home, and that South Node been going through there. And she, without even me saying anything, she was like all of my children moved away. Like she had adult children ranging from 18 to 25 or something like that. She's like, all of my children moved away within a few months. And you know, now I don't know what to do with myself, this empty nest syndrome and all like that. But she had to get rid of a couch or something like her kid, one of her kids took her couch. She had to get rid of the stuff that's in her house. And I was like, well, yeah, the South Node is draining things out of the area of your life that rolls over your home. But it's trying to make room for something new to come in. Okay, that's how the South Node works. It's a drain. So it takes things away. But when we get rid of things, then there's room for something new to come in. Okay, now let's go to Chiron here. And I think we will put that, then we'll go to body parts. Okay, so Chiron in retrograde all the way, I think it's till December 31st. In short here, Chiron is the wounded healer, okay? He wants us to heal from our wounds, especially if their wounds are coming from early childhood or potentially coming from a previous lifetime, okay? With him in retrograde, I mean, when we think retrograde, you could kind of, the shortest way to describe it is reevaluate what's going on there. If you got something near 24 degrees Aries, you might be on some sort of a healing journey. There might even be like some fallbacks in people's healing journeys while Chiron is in retrograde. And I feel like I should show you this as well. Let's pull up Eris. Okay, this right here is Eris, which Eris moves very, very slow. It's something like 560 years or something like that to go around the whole zodiac. So Eris moves really slow, but currently is very, very tightly conjunct Chiron. Eris is very aggressive, okay? Eris is like the goddess of discord, okay? She's Mars's sister and she will go to battle. She's a very strong and aggressive female energy. And so with them being so tightly conjunct and then both being in retrograde, I really do think that a lot of people are probably going through like frustrations with fallbacks in their healing journey. And that again can manifest in so many different ways, depending on if you have anything in your natal chart near 24 degrees Aries. Maybe you got something trining that near 24 degrees Leo or Sagittarius. Maybe you've got something opposing it near 24 degrees Libra. And what house in your natal chart does the sign of Aries come through? Because that will say a lot about where this Chiron and Eris energy is coming through. I'm thinking about a particular loved one, somebody very, very close to me, a family member who's got a son near 24 degrees Aries and is definitely going through somewhat of a fallback and a healing journey. And so that's something that it really can stand out and be pretty prominent for some people. Okay, so let's leave that there. Let's go to body parts. Okay, so in the body, as I kind of mentioned before, the sign of Taurus basically just rules this part of the body. I do have a medical astrology video about the sign of Taurus. You can go find that. I think I made a playlist for it or something, or just do a search for it. Medical astrology, Aaron Wage Taurus, or something like that. You'll find it. But it basically, like even like the lower parts of the ears, the lower underneath the ears, the lower jaw, the taste buds, the tongue. And not only that, but the sign of Taurus, again, it has a lot to do with food. I mean, ultimately, the way I feel about full moons in Taurus, unless there's something that's modifying it, like for the past 7 years or so, a lot of the full moons in Taurus have gone conjunct Uranus, which really changes things. But this is the first full moon in Taurus without Uranus in Taurus that we've had in like 6.5 years, which is very interesting. But I think of the sign like this is really a fantastic time to be indulging in a really good meal, like especially if it's like a homemade meal or going out to eat something nice or whatever. And pay attention to your taste buds. Pay attention, like you might be able to taste food a little bit more, your palate is functioning optimally. That sort of thing can go on with a full moon in Taurus. So I generally speaking like to have a nice homemade, especially like with like sweet potatoes or something like that. Things that came from earth, things that grew in the soil is perfect. But also this is obviously not going to be the case for most people out there. But if you've already got like a lot of Taurus energy, say your moon's in Taurus, or maybe your sun and your moon are in Taurus, or just your sun's in Taurus, or Venus is in Taurus, something like that, there's potential to experience kind of like a pressure, really more so in the hours surrounding this transit, like a stagnation that can go on in this area. And one thing that I have learned that is really good for that is cleavers. I actually had this experience for the first time in my whole life. It was the weirdest thing. I never had this happen before, but last spring, I want to say it was like we had the sun and Mercury, maybe even Venus in the sign of Taurus. And one day, all of a sudden, it felt what most people would just describe as a headache because it was like pressure, but I could very much, just because I've been studying this stuff for a while, I could tell there was like this pressure in this area of my body, like stagnation. Things were like kind of compressed. Cleavers, I made a cleavers tincture. It literally went away in like 20 minutes after I took my cleavers tincture. I was so excited and so relieved because I'm not somebody I just really try to avoid things like Advil and ibuprofen, and obviously Tylenol is getting all kinds of hype right now. But cleavers can be really, really good for that. Not only that, but cleavers are really good for the kidneys. They have an affinity for a lot of different parts of the body. So cleavers are going to be my go-to herb for this full moon. There's also something else that can go on if somebody has a lot of Taurus energy in their natal chart. And I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice by any means. Always check in with your healthcare practitioner and do your own research. But a lot of times there can be this, because it's fixed earth and it holds energy in, it's like a slower metabolism kind of energy. A lot of times there could be even stagnation of like the lymphatic system. Not necessarily just like everybody should go do this for the full moon in Taurus, but if you're somebody who experiences this, if you already have a lot of Taurus energy in your natal chart, there's something called poke root, Poke, that needs to be taken in very, very small doses, but it basically like pokes through the lymphatic system and helps to prevent that stagnation. Again, I'm not a doctor, so this is not medical advice, but these are just things that I've learned from my wonderful teachers over the years. Okay, gemstones. The dedicated stackle birthstone, as I've said so many times before, is emerald. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why. Because Emerald is Mercury's stone. Venus is what rules Taurus. So I don't know what the connection is there. If anybody knows, please feel free to leave a comment. I mean, of course, I've Googled it and done some internet search on it, but I feel like that's kind of generic information that I'm getting from the internet. I like to go from what the old books say, and I can't find the connection there. But obviously, if you're a Taurus and you like to, wear your emerald, that could be a beautiful thing. Emeralds are said to be really good for mental function and clarity and communication as well. But the stones that I like to work with when we've got a full moon in the sign of Taurus, first is rose quartz. I pulled these out before. This is I forget what it's called specifically, but it is a massage tool. And this guy too, I especially like to go for the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Taurus when we're having a full moon in the sign of Taurus. Rose quartz is kind of like perfect for the sign of Taurus because it's a calming stone. Rose quartz is, I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of probably I mean, it kind of depends specifically on where, if you're like angry or if you're sad or something like that, then there's certain technicalities. But overall, if you're somebody who wants calmness in your environment, rose quartz can be a really, really good one for that. Next up, I'm going to mention Jade. Jade comes in so many different colors and shapes and sizes. This is another strange little massage tool. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know like the real. I'm certainly not a professional with working with massage tools, but I do like to use them when they're made out of minerals. But jade is actually said to be really good for manifesting like luck with material things, things that money or say you're trying to manifest a new bed or whatever it is. Jade is said to be really, really good for that. It resonates beautifully with the sign of Taurus. But another thing that I'm going to mention here, this right here is citrine. But I need to go off on a little bit of a citrine tangent here because, and I just learned this just a few years ago, vast majority of citrine out there is actually heat treated amethyst. Okay, so this right here is actually amethyst that was put through some sort of a heating process that turns it orange. So when you go to a crystal shop and you buy citrine, it's usually like a yellow or orange color. Unless it's really expensive, it's probably not real citrine because there is such a thing as real citrine, but it's not quite as affordable as, heat treated amethyst. But still, amethyst is also said to be good for manifesting, financial wealth, okay, or material things. In fact, what I used to do, I would print out I had a printed out version of my natal chart, which I don't know what I did with that, but when we would have like say a full moon in Taurus or something like that where it's like has to do with finances, I would take my little pieces of citrine and I'd put them in my second house in my natal chart. That's a house of money and material possessions. And so that's just some little funny little trick I like to do. But those are, if you're somebody who's let's say you're trying to manifest a new car, or maybe you're trying to manifest a raise, or maybe you're just trying to manifest a job where you can make money. Citrine and sage might be good for that. Lastly, what I'm going to mention here, this right here is carnelian, which carnelian is a beautiful stone. And the reason I bring it up, because A, it does resonate beautifully with the sign of Taurus, but it resonates beautifully with the sign of Scorpio. Again, the sun is in Scorpio, opposing the moon. The sign of Scorpio, I don't mean to say that it's the sign of sexual trauma, but if there was a sign that would be most associated to things that we're trying to heal from some sort of sexual trauma in our life, that would be the sign of Scorpio. Okay, there's other things that can come into play, the eighth house, all sorts of things, Pluto, but the sign of Scorpio would be the sign that's most associated with that. And I kid you not, I mean, it's honestly, it's really sad because I kid you not when I say I've met so many women and men, clearly more women than men, but I have met some men through, my clients and that sort of thing that have experienced sexual trauma. But women especially, it seems like, I don't know, I'm throwing a number out there, but it seems like 80% of women, adult women, have had to experience some sort of sexual trauma. And so with that said, especially with the moon being exalted in the super moon and the sign of Taurus, calm natured energy, and the sun going through the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio wants to flesh it out. That is where carnelian comes into play. This is the best, in my very strong opinion, the best mineral for trying to heal from sexual trauma. Okay, I feel like I made that way too long. Apologies for rambling and also apologies for getting this out to you guys with such short notice again. If you'd like to schedule a reading with me, you can schedule through my website, which is erinwageastrology.com. You always find a link for that in the description below. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.